Hi, I'm Jamie from Stonemaier Games, and today I am excited to be talking about the Board Game Geek Top 100. I'm going to talk about the games in the top 100. And actually, when I originally decided to film this video, I thought I'd do two videos. I thought I'd do a video about the heavy games in the top 100, and then I'd do a separate video about the light games in the top 100. But there are very few light games, as I found out, in the top 100. Really very, very few games that I would consider truly light games. There are a number of medium weight games, a lot of heavyweight games, but very few light games. So I'm just doing a video about the Board Game Geek Top 100. If you're not familiar with Board Game Geek, this is it's a lot of different things, but it's a giant list of all games that exist, all tabletop games that exist. It gives people ways to rate those games, to wish list those games, to talk about those games, have conversations about those games. It is the online community for tabletop games, or the main one. And part of that means that because people are rating games on Board Game Geek, that games also have a ranking in comparison to all other games. They have this rating that is a composite of what people have actually said, and then the site balances out that rating with kind of false ratings, so that, especially early on, so that someone can't just have like a 10 ranked game, or the number one game ranked in the world, through a single rating of 10 on the rating. So it's a formula that we don't really know exactly what that formula is, but it builds in a few different elements to determine which games earn which ranking. But typically it takes a lot of ratings to work your way, a lot of very good ratings to work your way into the top 100 games on Board Game Geek. Also, I should mention that people rate games for different reasons. I personally rate games that I've actually played and have opinions about. And so every game that I play, after I play it, I rate it on Board Game Geek. And sometimes I go back after multiple plays and I change that rating. I adjust it a little bit based on if I like the game more or less after multiple plays. But I rate the game based on my experience playing that game and how I feel about that game personally. Other people might do other things. You might rate games for other reasons. But I think I wish there was almost a separate way to rate like the creators of games or the artists for games. So if you don't like the creator, if you don't like the designer for personal reasons, that you can rate them separately than the game they designed that you actually enjoy playing, or that you actually have played that game. This is a bigger topic. I didn't mean to really go into this all that much. But the format for today's video, is that I'm going to be talking about pretty much all 100 games, but I will spend most of my time on my favorites. And I've broken them down into different categories that you'll see on the screen in a second. So again, there won't be many visuals until I get to the part of the video where I'm talking about the games in the top 100 that I will always play. Those are my favorite games there. But I am starting this topic by letting you know that people do rate games for different reasons, and that does impact how games end up in the top 100. And so I am curious to a certain extent how you choose to rate games, and if you ever rate games that you haven't actually played, which I think you shouldn't do. And that's my opinion. Rate games that you've played and not for other reasons, but that's just me. So let's start out with ambassador picks. So Stonemaier Ambassadors picked the following games as their favorite game in the top 100. And these are games that appeared multiple times multiple ambassadors chose these games. In alphabetical order: A Feast for Odin, Ark Nova, Brass Birmingham, Dune Imperium, Eclipse, Food Chain Magnate, Frosthaven, Gloomhaven, John Company, Paladins of the West Kingdom, Root, Scythe, Spirit Island, Teotihuacan, Terra Mystica, and Too Many Bones. There are a few games that I have not played in the top 100. And one slight disclaimer here is that there are a couple games in the top 100 where there are two different versions of that game, the same game. I'm hesitant to say the same game. An example of this would be Eclipse and Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy, which is a separate game, but it's a new edition of the original game. So I have played Eclipse. I have not played Eclipse Second Dawn, or whatever it's called. But the games that I have played, no versions of it all, are War of the Ring, Frosthaven, although caveats on both of those. I've played Star Wars Rebellion, and I've also played Gloomhaven, but So those games are a little bit associated. But I haven't played War of the Ring. I haven't played Frosthaven. I haven't played Mage Knight, Kingdom Death Monster, or Dominant Species. But I've played every other game on the list. The Stonemaier games on the list, so I won't be including these in other rankings here that I'll mention today, are Scythe, Wingspan, and Viticulture. Those games from Stonemaier Games all appear in the top 100 currently. Oh, and I should also mention, I'm recording this video on July 2nd, 2024. So if you were watching this in the future, some of the games in the top 100 that I mentioned may no longer be there. They may have been replaced by other games. And so some games that I also don't mention that are in the top 100 now, in the future when you're watching it, they aren't there yet. So I'm not talking about them today. Last, I have campaign games. I put campaign games in a different category. And within each of these categories that I mentioned today, I am, instead of using alphabetical order, I'm using the order in which they appear on the top 100, starting with the highest ranked games. I separated campaign games because in my mind, they're different experiences than these games, especially since the categories that I use for the rest of the games are, I respect the game, but I'm not compelled to play it again. I'll play the game again. I want to play the game more, and I will always play the game. So campaign games don't really fit into any of those categories. I've played these games, and I won't play them again because I've already played them. Played through the entire campaign, or played at least part of the campaign. Those games are Pandemic Legacy, Gloomhaven, Sleeping Gods, Oathsworn, Mechs vs. Minions, Tainted Grail, and Clank Legacy. I have written Tainted Grain in my notes here. That would be a very different game, but I would play that actually. Tainted Grain, a farming version of Tainted Grail. Absolutely, I'm in. All right, so let's start with the lowest of the categories. I respect these games, but I am not compelled to play them again. I feel like this is a respectful way of acknowledging some amazing designs, even though they weren't for me in a way. So these games are Twilight Imperium, Twilight Struggle, Eclipse, Root, Barrage, Food Chain Magnate, Pax Pamir, Kanban, On Mars, Lisboa, The Gallerist, Star Wars Imperial Assault, Android Netrunner, Robinson Crusoe, The Search for Planet X, Le Havre, and Decrypto. These are games that I would not seek out. Really, even as I say them, though, they're all amazing games for someone to be up in the top 100. And I bet if I was playing them with someone who was really, really excited about them, I would still play with them. If that's the game they wanted to play, I'd play any of those games. But I'm not compelled to play them again, despite respecting them from a design perspective. The games that I will play again, I know that I'll play again. These are games that I'm not like super excited to play again, but I will play again if someone brings them up. And I'm guessing I will actually play them again in the future, are Brass Birmingham, Terraforming Mars, Star Wars Rebellion, Spirit Island, Through the Ages, Great Western Trail, Nemesis, Too Many Bones, Puerto Rico, Anachrony, Blood Rage, Mansions of Madness, Cthulhu Death May Die, Maracaibo, Obsession, Grand Austria Hotel, Paladins of the West Kingdom, Hegemony, Race for the Galaxy, Fields of Arl, Beyond the Sun, Teotihuacan, Inish, Battlestar Galactica, Heat, Cascadia, Five Tribes, and Aeon's End. Now we're getting to the part of the list of the games that I am really excited about in general. These are games that I've played multiple times that I know I want to play more in the future. Not quite my top tier, but getting closer to it. These are the games that I want to play more. Gaia Project, Lost Ruins of Arnak, Everdell, Underwater Cities, Caverna, Agricola, Power Grid, The Voyages of Marco Polo, Azul, El Grande, and A Feast for Odin. These are all games partially on this list because as much as I love them, there are definitely circumstances where I'm just not personally in the mood to play some of these games. But I've had amazing experiences with all of the games on that list. Agricola was one of the formative Euro games that got me back into the hobby as an adult after getting into Magic for a while, then Catan, then got into Agricola. That was what then took me on to the kind of the next level of games. I love the games on that list. Finally, let's get to the top tier. These are games that I will always play, and I'm going to switch over to actually give you a visual now. These are in the order in which they appear in the BoardGameGeek Top 100. So these aren't ranked for myself, but I guess maybe I should do these from the opposite order. I'll do these from the opposite order. So I'll start at so right now the 100th ranked game on the list is Architects of the West Kingdom. So let's start there. We'll go down. I just spoiled the top one, but you probably knew it was coming if you follow this video series. So this is Architects of the West Kingdom from Shem Phillips. This is an amazing worker placement game, a worker placement game that opened my eyes to what worker placement games could be, because you start off with a ton of workers. This is not a game about getting more workers. This is a game about having so many workers, and you get to place many of them on the board at the same time, but only one at a time, typically. I don't think there are any exceptions to that. You're placing one on the board, and they can gather on places. So you can see right here, the yellow player has used this action space 3 times, and every time they use that action space, it gets better for them. The tension in this game is knowing that other players or yourself can capture all of the workers at a certain location and send them to jail. And so that is a tough moment when that happens, but it means that you can pursue a single action and continue turn after turn to put a worker on an action. But as you do, you make that action more lucrative for another player to choose that group of workers and send them to jail, because they get a benefit when they do that. I think this is an amazing point of tension in the game. I think it's part of a really feel-good moment in the game too, because if this yellow worker comes back around to their turn and no one has taken their workers from this action, do they place another worker there and get a really, really strong benefit, thereby also further incentivizing someone else to capture that group of workers again? Or do they not? Do they spread their workers around a little bit more? Really great decision space, really neat idea of just starting with so many workers at the beginning of the game. This is Architects of the West Kingdom, which I believe is ranked currently 100 on the list. I don't know the rankings offhand for the rest of the games here. I'll just be showing off their images. So that's the first one. Going down the list, Seven Wonders, I believe, is the next game to appear on the top 100. Seven Wonders is a card drafting game where you have a hand of cards, you're choosing one, you're playing that card, or doing a couple other things with it. Usually you're playing the card, and then you're passing the hand around the table. You're building this amazing tableau of cards that has a bunch of different mini games. There's straight up points on the blue cards. The red cards are combat that you compare at the end of each of the 3 eras, compare them to your opponents. There's trading cards, yellow cards that do a couple different things. There's resources that you're producing on the brown cards and the gray cards. And then there's the science cards, which are 2 different types of set collection. Just a lot of wonderful mini games in Seven Wonders. It's a game that I love playing now, particularly on Board Game Arena, because it's a really fast filler on Board Game Arena. But I'm also always happy to play on the tabletop too. It has a great table presence. It plays well. If people know how to play, you just sit down and jump in and play. Yeah, I love Seven Wonders. Really, really great game. The next game on the list is, as heavily zoomed in, Lords of Waterdeep here. I actually just the other day got the craving to play Lords of Waterdeep, a game that I don't own except in digital format, but someday I probably should just own it. It's a wonderful worker placement game, and it does everything that I want a worker placement game to do. It has tension between the action spots. It has a clear action economy on the board, but that action economy is expanded as players build new action spaces over here. The quests in the game are really satisfying to complete, because you aren't just getting points from quests. That's the red here. You're also getting something else. In this quest, you get coins when you complete the quest. This one too. But some of the quests, actually this one does just give you points, but some of the quests give you an ongoing ability, or they give you resources to use on the next quest. So the puzzle of the order in which you complete quests and which quest you claim is a great puzzle in the game. There's a lot more I can talk about this game. I love Lords of Waterdeep. This is a game that I will always play. That's this category for this list. Next up on the list is Clank. I mentioned Clank Legacy earlier. I am eagerly awaiting Clank Legacy 2. I own pretty much everything related to Clank, except for Clank in Space. I do own Clank Catacombs, but I think still my favorite version of Clank is the version with the board, any version of Clank's boards, because I think the boards are just so well laid out, and it's so much fun, I think, to take your little explorer, you're playing card. It's a deck building game. You're deck building and using cards to move your adventurer through this dungeon. And every time I make a choice to move along one path, that means that I'm choosing not to move along another path. And that is an impactful choice in the game that makes me wonder about paths not taken. Whenever I play, I'm like, oh, I'm taking this path. I love this choice, but I want to play again so I can see what would have happened if I had taken this other path, or gone a little bit deeper into the dungeon, or not gone as deep, ventured over to the other side of the board, because you can jump over to the other side of the board. I love the combination of this set board and the many different paths that you can take, combined with the deck building and the vast variety of cards that come from the deck building in Clank. So that is Clank on the list. Next up is Clans of Caledonia, which this is the first of several games I'll mention where you have this wonderful player mat filled with tokens, and you are pulling things off that player mat to put on the map itself. You're changing the shape of the map. You're changing kind of possession and production on the map itself. And while you're doing that, you are increasing your own production of all these different things, bread and wheat, your cheese, meat, all these different things that you can make. It is one of these games where the game gives you a lot of money, and the length of your round is determined by how you spend that money. Do you spend the money? Do you spend it on to put out this token? This costs $9, or do you spend it on something else? Do you spend a lot of money all at once, a little bit of money here? How much do you stretch out to your round? And then at the beginning of every round, you get more money. You get money that you have earned and money that the game just gives you, and you decide how you want to spend that. It's a plentiful game. It's a bountiful game, and I really, really enjoyed that about Clans of Caledonia. Also has a really cool market over here that I won't even go into now. Really cool board formation where you're just putting together 4 big tiles to form a nice variable board. Lots of great design decisions in Clans of Caledonia. Quacks of Quedlinburg. I was delighted to see that this is in the top 100. This is one of the lighter games on this list, but I love Quacks. You probably hear me talk about it on this video all too much on this video series, because this combines many different things that I like. There's engine building, there's simultaneous play, there's bag building, there's variable definitions of the tokens that you're putting in your bag. There's push your luck. I love push your luck in games too. Yeah, it's been the tiles in this game were an inspiration for our edition of Libertalia Winds of Galecrest, and I just played this actually a week and a half ago. Whenever someone says, "Do you want to play Quacks?" It is just, I have a delightful time playing Quacks, and even teaching Quacks. I find it is a delightful game to teach as well. I think the person who we taught won the game when we played recently. That's the Quacks of Quedlinburg. One game that I don't get to play often enough is Tzolk'in. I love Tzolk'in, the Mayan calendar. It has a kind of tracks and progression in several different ways. There are these cult tracks yeah, I'll call them cult tracks, whatever they're officially called. You're moving up these tracks to gain points at different times of the game. You're getting different residual benefits at different times of the game. But you also have these tech tracks over here that you're advancing on to improve different types of actions. The whole gear system of putting workers on these sub gears and deciding when to put on workers versus when to use a turn to take off workers based on how far they've advanced on the gear is an amazing choice in the game. And I love how the game automates it with this gear system. Yeah, this is an incredible game. This is I'm surprised actually that it's gotten to be this low on the BoardGameGeek top 100, because it was once much higher, and it's a game that I don't know. I love this game. I love Tzolk'in the Mayan calendar. Orleans is next, another bag building game like Quacks. This is a heavier version, or not version. This is a heavier game than Quacks with bag building, where you're pulling these workers out of a bag and deciding where you want to place them. And the placement part is simultaneous, and then because you're placing them all on your own personal player board, and then you're activating them player by player to determine what you get. And many times what you're getting is a new worker. There is no example here, but many of the actions in the game have you placing 2 different workers to get a new worker type that you get to add to your bag from then on. And when you gain that worker type, you also advance on a track on the common board. Let's see if I can find an image of that, of the board. Here's the player mat. Here's where you can gain new workers. Here's the tracks. Yeah, so it's 2 benefits. I always love games that give you 2 benefits at once. You're gaining a token, a new worker that you get to use from then on, and you advance on this track to gain different benefits. Great system there of giving players lots of good things every time they make a decision. I love the combination of the simultaneous play combined with a little bit of not simultaneous play, because there are some things in this phase of the game that do affect other players. But yeah, Orleans, love Orleans. Terra Mystica. I talked about games where you have a bunch of things on mats and you're removing those things to put them on the board to get better benefits and better income. And the Hansa Teutonica, I think, was the first game that did this that I'm aware of. But then Terra Mystica came along and wowed me with how it does this. It inspired Scythe, and how Scythe has that same system. But it also has this amazing magic pool system where you're shifting around these power tokens to use at certain times to gain benefits that are on the board, or these default benefits on your mat when you really need them. And the asymmetry in this game, I love the asymmetry in this game. Every mat is a little bit different. Every faction has their own unique ability, their own way to play, and different ways to optimize it, because you might be choosing a path to go up to this building and unlock this building, which has a very different benefit than this building. They always have these paths within the asymmetric factions themselves. So yeah, I love Terra Mystica. It is still, I think, my top pick of all Terra Mystica games, but I do love Terra Nova. I think Terra Nova is a simpler version of Terra Mystica that plays in about half the time, so it's a little bit easier to get to the table. That one isn't in the top 100. Age of Innovation, the heavier version that recently came out, also a very impressive design, and will probably, by the time you're watching this, will be in the top 100. I really like that one too, but I always gravitate. I always come back to this one. Gaia Project is also the other game in this line. That's Terra Mystica. Concordia. Concordia was of heavy inspiration for my game Expeditions, because it has this hand management system where you aren't really deck building, because you're never randomizing your hand. Rather, you have the same hand of cards as all of their players. On your turn, you're choosing to play one of those cards, and that card is out of your hand until you choose a certain card or play a certain card that brings all the cards you've played back to your hand. Handcrafting, hand management, whatever you want to call it, it is a wonderful system in Concordia. Concordia also features a ton of positive player interaction as you gain positioning presence on different regions, and you gain benefits from those regions, but you also gain benefits like when you activate the production for a certain region, you'll gain benefits for activating production, but also all other players who have a presence in that region will also gain from that production. The production system and the positive player interaction through that is great. So many great mechanisms. And I actually, even though people talk about the look of the game, I actually really like this part of the look of the game. The map is stunning, I think, in photos and in person. This visual of the game I really, really like. That's Concordia. Talked about Seven Wonders earlier. Seven Wonders Duel is much higher ranked at this point than Seven Wonders. And Seven Wonders Duel is it my top two? Yes, my top 2-player game on this list. It is not a drafting game. Rather, it's this, or not a hand drafting game. It is a public card drafting game where you're selecting a card, as this player is doing in this action shot. And when they select this card, they end up revealing or making accessible and revealing this card right here. So the next player to go has the option of choosing this card, as well as any of the other cards that don't have any cards on top of it. It's a really cool drafting system. Otherwise, it's very similar to Seven Wonders. You're building up a tableau of cards, but this drafting system is great. And to date, I still don't think that we've seen a game at higher player counts take this system to the same level that it is in Seven Wonders. I am very curious to see about the Lord of the Rings inspired game that has its roots in Seven Wonders Duel, to see how that turns out. But yeah, Seven Wonders Duel, one of my favorites. I'll always play it. Castles of Burgundy. There was a time where this would not have been on my will always playlist, but I've come around and I really, really enjoyed Castles of Burgundy. I'm still kind of intimidated by all the different meanings of the various tiles, but the newest version of the game has a really good reference guide, and it gave each player a reference guide, so they can each use the reference guide to remember what all the tiles do. But the whole system of rolling 2 dice and choosing tiles from sections on the board that show those numbers and doing different things with those tiles, oftentimes placing them on your board to complete different regions of different colors, with a vast variety of different tiles that you're choosing to complete these regions, is just really neat. It's a really, really clever system in Castles of Burgundy, and I'm always happy to play it. Dune Imperium, right near the top of the list now. Dune Imperium, looks like we have the Italian version here. This is a game that I will always play, whether it's this or the Uprising version of the game. I love so much about this game. The deck building, the worker placement, and the deck building telling you where you're allowed to place workers. How well the theme is integrated into the mechanisms of this game made me want to learn more about the world of Dune, and got me excited about the book, or the first book at least, and the movies that came afterward. The asymmetry in the game, the tension of that the game ends after a player gets 10 victory points. It's only 10 victory points, and you can very clearly see on the board how to get most of those victory points. It's a wonderful tension to have so few points in the game and have so much tension arise from those few points. And just also that this is a game with combat where it doesn't feel like you're picking on anyone. You're not taking over anyone's stuff. It's very clear how much, other than the I want to say intrigue cards. I think that's it, intrigue cards. You can very clearly see how strong each player is as they've entered combat. It's very transparent, deterministic combat, other than those intrigue cards. I think it's a really clever combat system, and you just know there's going to be a little bit of combat after each round if you've chosen to be involved in it. Yeah, Dune Imperium. Dune Imperium. I really, really love this game and continue to love this game to this day. It is up there with the longer games on this list that I enjoy. It's probably, right at that cusp, but I do still get this to the table quite often, as well as the last game on the list, Ark Nova, probably the longest game on this list. I love Ark Nova. Ark Nova has brought so much joy to my tabletop, especially in my opinion. My favorite thing about the game is the animal cards and how each animal that you're playing has certain requirements you're trying to meet to play that animal. And once you get to play that animal, you get instant benefits, often ongoing benefits, end game benefits. And it feels really good for me in Ark Nova to build up to a hard to play animal. That's always really, really satisfying to me. And that is paired with an amazing action system. This action system where every player, at least in the core game, has the same 5 action cards. And the strength of the card is determined by essentially how long you haven't taken that action. So if I haven't taken this action in a long time, it's at the 5 strength level. Once I take that action, I'll remove that card from this row, slot it into section 1, and slide all the other cards over to make a new action valued at 5. It isn't the first time we've seen this system, but I think it's the best implementation of the system that I've seen in the game. Also, it has the mechanism from Rogers the Ganges, where the game end is determined by 2 different victory point tracks that are intersecting with each other. They're colliding with each other to determine when the game is end. There's so many little subsystems and mechanisms in this game that are so clever. But yeah, I love building a zoo with these delightful animals with different requirements to determine how and when you get to actually play these animals. So yeah, that's Ark Nova, one of the top ranked games on BoardGameGeek right now, and the last game that I will always play on this list. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know this is a lot of information to throw at you, a lot of different games to talk about today, but I would love to hear your thoughts on, let's say, the games on the BoardGameGeek Top 100 that you will always play. Let's narrow it down to that, and I focus on the positive side of that. Obviously, there's some games on this list that I said that I will very rarely play, but I still respect them. I still am glad that I got to play them, and I look forward to playing the few games on this list that I haven't actually played yet. But I'd love to hear your favorites, the games on the top 100 that you will always play. Let me know in the comments below, and let me know if you have any thoughts about some of the concepts that I brought up in today's video. Thanks.